Prepare for an objective journey into the heart of the legal process. The footage you are about to see remains completely unfiltered and unedited. It is a raw, first-hand account from the front lines of justice, delivered with utmost professionalism and integrity.
Stop right there. Hand me your ID and that room key. I just checked in. Ask the front desk. Am I being detained? You match a suspicious person call. Don't argue. Turn around. Suspicious isn't a crime. What's your legal basis? Yes or no? Last warning.
The marble lobby was quiet enough to hear the soft hum of the chandelier. Midnight blue carpet, polished brass railings, the faint scent of lemon cleaner mixed with expensive cologne. A black man in a tailored charcoal suit stood near the front desk, one hand resting on the handle of a leather briefcase, the other holding a keycard. He had just arrived from a late flight. His shoulders were stiff with fatigue, not fear. "Sir, stop right there." The voice cut through the lobby like a snapped wire. Sharp, commanding. A uniformed police officer stepped forward from beside a decorative column, one hand already resting near his duty belt. The officer's eyes locked onto the man, scanning him from shoes to collar as if searching for a flaw. "Is there a problem, officer?" the man asked calmly. His voice was low, controlled, professional. "I need to see some identification. And that room key." The officer took another step closer, closing the distance without invitation. The man glanced toward the front desk. The night clerk had frozen hands hovering above the keyboard, eyes darting between them. A couple waiting for the elevator slowed, pretending to scroll on their phones while watching everything. "I'm a registered guest," the man said. "I just checked in. You can confirm that with the desk." The officer shook his head slightly, lips tightening. "We received a call about a suspicious individual loitering in the lobby. You match the description." "What description?" the man asked. His briefcase lowered slowly to the floor. "I walked in 5 minutes ago." The officer ignored the question. "Sir, do not set anything down. Keep your hands where I can see them." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. The man raised his hands slightly, palms open, a familiar gesture he had used not in fear, but in courtrooms when calming tense witnesses. Around them, the polished surfaces reflected the scene from every angle. Phones came out. A quiet ripple moved through the onlookers. "I'm asking again," the man said. "On what legal basis are you detaining me?" The officer's jaw flexed. He did not like the question. Most people didn't ask questions like that. Most people complied. "Sir, you are being detained until I can verify who you are and what you're doing here." The man nodded once slowly. That nod was not agreement. It was documentation. His eyes moved briefly to a woman standing near the elevators, her phone clearly pointed in their direction. "Please keep recording," he said softly. The officer noticed. His posture stiffened. "Now we've got a problem," he muttered. "You're being uncooperative." "No," the man replied. "I'm being precise." The officer reached for his handcuffs. The metallic click echoed louder than it should have in the cavernous lobby. Somewhere behind them, an elevator chimed, doors opening to no one. As the officer closed in, convinced he was asserting control, he had no idea that the man standing in front of him spent his days deciding whether detentions like this were constitutional. He did not grow up expecting rooms like this to welcome him. The man standing in the hotel lobby learned early that spaces with polished floors and quiet power were rarely built with him in mind. He was born on the south side of Cleveland, in a neighborhood where sirens were background noise and police encounters were lessons passed down like family recipes. Keep your hands visible. Speak slowly. Never argue on the street. Survive now. Fight later. His mother worked 2 jobs. His father was gone before he could form a memory. What he had instead were books borrowed from the public library 3 blocks away and a guidance counselor who once told him he argued like a lawyer. That comment stuck. He carried it through high school, through a scholarship to a state university, through nights studying constitutional law while classmates slept. He was not the loudest student in the room. He was the one who listened, took notes, and remembered everything. Law school refined him, but did not soften him. He learned precedent the way some people learned prayer. Terry v. Ohio. Miranda. The Fourth Amendment carved into his thinking like muscle memory. He clerked. He litigated. He argued cases where liberty balanced on the phrasing of a sentence. He learned how power justified itself and how often it failed the people it claimed to protect. Years later, when he was appointed a federal magistrate judge, the oath felt heavy in his mouth. Not because of pride, but because of responsibility. He presided over arraignments, search warrant applications, suppression hearings. He ruled on whether officers crossed the line. He wrote decisions that never made headlines but changed lives quietly. He believed in the system not because it was perfect, but because he understood exactly how fragile it was. He did not wear that authority loudly. Outside the courtroom, he blended in. A tailored suit, polished shoes, neutral expression. He had learned long ago that signaling power as a black man could be dangerous in the wrong setting. That night, he was simply tired. A delayed flight, a conference in another state, a hotel near the courthouse for convenience. Nothing unusual, nothing provocative. The officer confronting him came from a very different path. He grew up in a suburb where police were family friends, not threats. His father wore a badge for 25 years. Dinner conversations framed the world clearly. Cops versus criminals. Order versus chaos. He joined the force young, eager to prove himself, eager to be respected. His record looked clean on paper. No suspensions, no terminations. But buried beneath the surface were patterns no one wanted to examine too closely. Complaints dismissed as misunderstandings. Citizens described as hostile. Body camera footage labeled inconclusive. Supervisors wrote notes about attitude and tone, then moved on. He learned without ever being told directly that consequences were negotiable. Calls about suspicious people were his specialty. He prided himself on instincts. He believed good policing meant acting before something went wrong. He had internalized a dangerous shortcut. Presence equaled threat when it did not match expectation. He rarely named that bias. He called it experience. When he received the call from the hotel manager about a man lingering in the lobby late at night, he had already filled in the blanks before arriving. Luxury hotel. After hours. Someone who did not belong. By the time he stepped into the lobby and saw a black man in a suit, the narrative locked into place. Everything that followed was filtered through it. When the man spoke calmly, asked precise questions, refused to shrink. The officer felt challenged. Not legally, personally. Authority in his mind required submission. Questioning felt like defiance. Defiance demanded correction. He did not see a judge. He saw a problem. What neither man said out loud in that moment was that they were both shaped by systems larger than the lobby they stood in. One had learned to survive power by mastering it. The other had learned to wield power without ever being forced to justify it. Their paths were always going to cross somewhere. That night it happened under chandeliers and security cameras with witnesses holding phones and a silence heavy enough to remember. The officer did not loosen his stance. If anything, he widened it. Feet planted, shoulders squared, a posture meant to signal control to everyone watching. The man in the suit noticed immediately. He had seen that posture hundreds of times before from the bench on grainy body camera footage, slowed down frame by frame. "Sir, I need you to stop talking and provide identification," the officer said. "Now." The man reached slowly into his inner jacket pocket. Not abruptly, not nervously. Slowly enough that every movement could be tracked by the human eye and the security cameras above them. He pulled out a leather wallet and held it open at chest level. "This is my government-issued identification," he said. "And this is my hotel keycard. I am lawfully present. I have committed no crime." The officer glanced at the items but did not take them. Instead, his eyes flicked back to the man's face. Too calm. Too confident. That confidence bothered him more than anger ever would. "You don't get to decide that," the officer replied. "I do." Behind them, the small crowd had grown. A businessman with a rolling suitcase stopped completely. A woman leaned against a pillar phone, held steady recording without blinking. The night clerk swallowed hard fingers, gripping the edge of the desk. The man exhaled once controlled. "Officer, I am asking you a second time. Am I being detained, and if so, on what reasonable suspicion?" The word reasonable landed heavily. The officer heard it clearly. Too clearly. That was not a word most civilians used. A flicker of doubt passed through his eyes, quickly replaced by irritation. "You are matching the description of a suspicious person reported by hotel staff," he said. "That's enough." "Matching what description?" the man asked. "Wearing a suit, standing upright, breathing." A few people in the crowd shifted. Someone murmured, "That's messed up." Another voice whispered, "He didn't do anything." The officer turned his head sharply toward the sound. Phones dropped slightly, then rose again. The attention was no longer passive. It was judgmental. I'm going to need you to face the wall, the officer said. The man did not move. Instead, he adjusted his stance, placing his feet shoulder-width apart, hands still visible. His voice remained even, but it carried now. Officer, listen carefully. You are escalating the situation without cause. There are witnesses, there are cameras. I am fully compliant, but I will not consent to an unlawful detention. That was the moment the officer's decision hardened. Compliance with commentary felt like disrespect. His authority, questioned in public, demanded reinforcement. Turn around, hands behind your back. The click of the cuffs came before the crowd could react. Metal closed around wrists that had signed judicial orders hours earlier. The sound echoed across the marble floor. Sharp. Final. A woman gasped. Someone said, "No way." Phones zoomed in closer. The man did not resist. He did not pull away. He turned slowly, deliberately, allowing the cuffs to settle. His jaw tightened for just a fraction of a second, then relaxed. His mind was already working through timelines, statutes, remedies. As the officer guided him toward the side wall, the man spoke again. Not loudly, not emotionally. "Officer, you are making a grave mistake." The officer said nothing. His grip tightened instead. The cuffs were too tight. He noticed it immediately. Not because of pain, but because of experience. The metal bit into the soft skin near his wrists as the officer adjusted them with an unnecessary tug. The sound was dull and final, a mechanical certainty that left no room for misunderstanding. The lobby had gone silent. Not the comfortable silence of a late-night hotel, but the brittle kind that followed something going very wrong. Even the elevator stopped chiming. The only sound was the faint crackle of the officer's radio and the distant hum of traffic outside. The man was guided forward. Not gently. A firm hand pressed between his shoulder blades, steering him toward a decorative wall meant to display abstract art. His briefcase remained on the floor near the front desk, abandoned like evidence at a crime scene. "Slowly," the officer said, as if the man had done anything fast. Each step felt longer than the last. Not because of distance, but because every movement was being recorded, processed, archived by strangers holding phones. He could feel their eyes. He did not look back. He kept his gaze forward, posture straight, breathing measured. In that moment, the weight was not humiliation. It was familiarity. He had seen this exact posture on defendants too many times. Hands cuffed behind the back, shoulders squared, chin lifted just enough to preserve dignity. The system had a way of repeating itself. The officer leaned in close. "You should have just cooperated," he muttered. The man did not respond. He understood the lie embedded in the statement. Cooperation had never been the issue. Submission had. They moved toward the side entrance, away from the desk, away from witnesses who were now openly speaking. "This is wrong," a woman said. "He didn't do anything." "You can't do that," another voice added. The officer did not turn around. His jaw was set. His grip tightened again, fingers digging in as if pressure could erase doubt. Outside, the night air was colder. The flashing red and blue lights painted the hotel's glass doors in violent color. Each reflection multiplied the scene. A black man in handcuffs, a white officer in control, a story the country had seen before. The patrol car door opened. The plastic back seat waited. Hard. Unforgiving. Smelling faintly of disinfectant and old coffee. The man lowered himself in, carefully mindful of the cuffs. As he sat, the door closed with a heavy thud that sealed off the noise of the crowd and replaced it with a suffocating quiet. Inside the car, his thoughts sharpened. Timestamps, locations, witnesses, statutes. This was no longer happening to him. It was being documented by him. In the front seat, the officer sat for a moment without starting the engine. His reflection stared back at him in the rearview mirror. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. Not remorse, calculation. Neither man spoke as the car pulled away from the curb. The hotel lobby disappeared behind them, but the consequences were only beginning. The booking room smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flattening everything beneath them. The man sat on a molded plastic chair, hands still cuffed behind his back, posture unchanged. If anyone expected anger, pleading, or panic, they were disappointed. His stillness was unsettling in its own way. A younger officer approached with a clipboard, eyes dropping briefly to the cuffs, then to the man's face. Name, he asked, routine detached. The man gave it, clear, precise, no hesitation. Date of birth. Answered. Occupation. There was a pause, just long enough to matter. Federal magistrate judge, the man said. The pen stopped moving. The officer looked up sharply. then down again as if rereading the line he had just written. He let out a small breath through his nose and stepped away without another word. Minutes passed, or maybe seconds. Time thinned in places like this. A door opened at the far end of the room. A senior supervisor entered mid-40s. Tired eyes practiced authority. He held a tablet in his hand, scanning information as he walked. His expression shifted subtly with each step closer. He stopped in front of the man. "Sir, can you repeat your occupation for me?" The man met his gaze. "Federal magistrate judge, United States District Court." The room changed temperature, not physically, structurally. The supervisor turned slightly, tapping rapidly on the tablet. Database confirmations, credential verification, court affiliation. All of it came back clean. More than clean. Impeccable. He looked toward the arresting officer, who stood a few feet away, suddenly very aware of his hands, his stance, the eyes on him. "Did you verify this before detaining him?" the supervisor asked. The officer swallowed. "He said he was a judge, but I didn't think." "You didn't think," the supervisor repeated quietly. The cuffs came off quickly after that. Too quickly. Keys rattling, metal releasing skin that had already begun to redden. The man stood, rolling his shoulders, once reclaiming space. "I want everything preserved," he said calmly. "Body camera footage, dispatch logs, hotel security video, witness information. Tonight." "Yes, sir," the supervisor said, already nodding. The arresting officer's face had gone pale. His mouth opened once, then closed. There was nothing to say that would matter anymore. The man picked up his briefcase when it was returned to him. He checked the latch, straightened his jacket, and looked around the room one last time. "This never should have happened," the supervisor said. The man did not disagree. He simply responded, "That is exactly the problem. The lawsuit was filed before the week ended. 27 pages. Single-spaced, no dramatics, no unnecessary language. Just facts, timestamps, statutes, and video stills pulled frame by frame. It named the officer individually and the department institutionally. Unlawful detention. False arrest. Violation of the Fourth Amendment. Equal protection. Each claim supported by evidence that already existed before the ink dried. The videos surfaced first. A shaky phone angle from near the elevators. A longer, steadier clip from a guest seated in the lobby. Hotel security footage released after a formal preservation request. Within 48 hours, the story had moved beyond the city, then beyond the state. Headlines were careful at first, then they weren't. Federal judge detained in hotel lobby. Suspicious person call ends in constitutional crisis. Comment sections filled faster than the facts could keep up. Millions of views. Hundreds of thousands of reactions. People recognized the scene because they had lived versions of it themselves. Others argued it was a misunderstanding until the footage made that argument impossible. Internal Affairs opened an investigation the same morning the lawsuit went public. The officer was placed on administrative leave. His body camera footage told a story he could not reframe. No threatening behavior, no attempt to flee, no crime articulated at any point. Just assumption layered on authority. Investigators pulled his record, not just the surface summary, the patterns underneath. Prior stops, disproportionate contacts, language used in reports, complaints that had been closed quietly, individually defensible, collectively undeniable. The department's legal counsel reviewed the case and said what no one wanted to hear. There was no defense. Qualified immunity would not apply. The law was clearly established. The violation was obvious. Settlement discussions began almost immediately. The officer was terminated before they concluded. Not for public relations. For cause. Policy violations. Constitutional breaches. Conduct unbecoming. His badge was taken. His pension frozen pending review. The career he believed was protected by the uniform ended with a signature on a letter. The city settled months later. The amount was significant. Large enough to draw attention. Not large enough to erase what happened. The judge donated a portion quietly. He kept the rest. Not as profit, as proof. Proof that accountability cost something. Policy changes followed. Mandatory bias audits. Revised protocols for suspicious person calls. Supervisor approval required for detentions in private commercial spaces. Training rewritten because training alone had failed before. The judge returned to work without comment. Back to the bench. Back to the routine. But his rulings carried a sharper clarity. He had not changed his beliefs. He had confirmed them. Justice did not arrive loudly. It arrived methodically. paper by paper, decision by decision, consequence by consequence. What happened in that hotel lobby was not complicated. It only felt complicated because authority often hides behind confusion. The legal failure was simple. A police officer detained a man without reasonable suspicion. The Fourth Amendment does not allow that. It never has. Suspicion must be based on specific, articulable facts tied to criminal activity, not feelings, not discomfort, not the way someone looks in a space an officer thinks they do not belong in. A suspicious person call is not a crime. Standing in a hotel lobby is not a crime. Asking why you are being detained is not resistance. The Constitution is clear on this point because it had to be. Power when left, vague expands. That is why courts exist to draw lines. That is why judges repeat the same principles over and over, even when they seem obvious. Especially when they seem obvious. There is also a psychological truth underneath the legal one. Bias rarely announces itself loudly. It operates quietly. It fills in gaps before evidence arrives. Once a narrative forms, the human brain defends it aggressively. Everything that contradicts it is treated as deception. Calm becomes suspicious. Confidence becomes arrogance. Knowledge becomes threat. That night, the officer did not see a federal judge because his mind had already decided what a threat looked like. Once that decision was made, every action was filtered through it. This is how ordinary encounters become constitutional violations. Not through hatred, but through unchecked certainty. So what should someone do if they find themselves in a similar situation? First, stay alive. That means staying calm, keeping your hands visible, and avoiding sudden movements. Assert your rights verbally, not physically. Ask clear questions. Am I being detained? What is the reason? You are not required to consent to searches. You are not required to answer questions beyond identifying yourself where legally required. Silence is not guilt. Second, document everything. If you can record. If you cannot, note times, names, badge numbers, locations. Witnesses matter. Cameras matter. Memory fades. Evidence does not. Third, understand that compliance in the moment does not mean surrendering your rights. Courts exist precisely because the street is not the place where power is balanced. Survive the encounter. Challenge it later. Finally understand the larger lesson. This did not end in accountability because the man was innocent. It ended in accountability because the evidence was undeniable. Most people do not have that advantage. That is why these stories matter. They are not about exceptional victims. They are about ordinary systems failing in predictable ways. The question left behind is not whether the officer was wrong. That much is settled. The question is whether we are willing to recognize how easily this could happen again. Different lobby, different name, same assumptions. What would you do if this happened to you or someone you love? And what should change so it does not keep happening to everyone else?
In our unwavering pursuit of the truth, accountability is our highest priority. We challenge those in power by presenting undeniable facts, because the records never lie. Thank you for watching and trusting our investigations.